Hey, I'm Woody Wyatt, and these are my thoughts on every new album that I heard in the past 2 weeks. Just quickly, I've got a lot of stuff that I'm working on, so stick around for the midpoint of this video, because I'm going to be making a few announcements. As always, we've got 10 albums, and I'm going to review them all, starting with... the new album from Geese, titled Getting Killed. And I'm not gonna lie, I've only been doing this channel for a few months. This is by far the album so far that I've been the most excited to talk about. Geese are quickly becoming one of my favourite bands of all time. Projector was a great album, but 3D Country genuinely blew me away. And the singles for this new album were so strange sounding that I just had to hear it when it came on. I was so excited. That being said, I didn't think it would be as good as 3D Country. That album was so good, there was no way this wouldn't be a disappointment. But now I've heard this album a few times, and I'm reviewing it here, and I'm not gonna lie, this may actually be my album of the year. This album was produced by Kenny Beats, who usually works more with hip-hop and other styles like that. On paper, the idea of him working with Geese sounded like it would be a disaster, but it ends up working exceptionally well. I mean, the band is still using a lot of the same influences that they used on 3D Country. The big difference, though, is these songs feel a lot looser, they feel a lot more improvised, they feel a lot more chaotic. After how good 3D Country was, I imagine a lot of people just wanted that album again, but no, they didn't do that. They took a risk and it really paid off. Also, lyrically, this album is very strange. I mean, we kind of already knew that would be the case when Trinidad was released as a single, and we had that weird bridge where he was talking about how his son is in bed, his daughters are dead, his wife's in the shed, and so on and so on. But pretty much the entire album is like that lyrically. It often sounds like he's just making it up on the spot. Now, is this album as good as 3D Country? I'm not sure. I'll say that just as a full album, Getting Killed is a better experience, but just as a collection of songs, the songs on 3D Country are just undeniably good. Some of the best songs we've got all decade. This album doesn't really have an obvious single. It's better enjoyed as a full album in my opinion. But just on its own, not comparing it to the previous album, this thing is fucking phenomenal, and it may honestly be my favourite album of the year so far. Then we've got King of Terrors, the debut EP from President. So for those that don't know, President are a band that pretty much just appeared out of nowhere. They were getting a lot of buzz before I think they'd even released anything. They're a masked band, so no one really knows their identity, kind of like Sleep Token. In fact, they're exactly like Sleep Token. That is my biggest problem with this EP. Guys, I'm gonna be honest, this thing blows. It is so derivative of other metal bands. I cannot believe that this band blew up so quickly. Hell, I brought up Sleep Token a moment ago. This band is so derivative of Sleep Token, I wouldn't be surprised if their original name was fucking Napcoin. Also, this thing just feels so insanely corporate. I listen to this and I don't hear a band, I just hear a singer with a backing track. Like, I was shocked to find out that this band aren't backed by some major label, because this just feels like some record executives trying to cash in on Sleep Token. And if I'm being honest, I'm not a big fan of them either. We'll probably talk about them some other day. Maybe this band will get better and more original when they release that full length. And it is kind of hard to say that a band ripped off another band. Like, really, if you think about it, everyone is pretty much just a rip-off of a rip-off of a rip-off of a rip-off. I don't know, I'm just really not a fan of this.
With a little love, if you want it, we can conquer it all.
Coming up next, we've got the new album from Biffy Clyro titled FUTIQUE. Biffy Clyro, yeah, they're okay. I haven't heard anything from them that I absolutely hated. I haven't really heard anything that I've loved from them. They've had a few songs that I kind of enjoyed, like Many of Horror. The indie stations that my parents used to listen to, like Radio X and Absolute Radio, played this band to death. To me at least, they're basically just the Scottish Foo Fighters, and they don't really have a full-length album that I've enjoyed as much as something like Wasting Light or Colour in the Shape. That being said, out of all the albums I've heard from them, this is probably my least favourite. It's probably their most pop album that I've heard, and it just kind of feels a bit soulless. I don't want to call this a cash grab, because there's still some of Biffy Clyro's usual sound in here. It just kind of feels a bit watered down. I haven't heard any of Biffy Clyro's early albums, but apparently they had more of a post-hardcore influence, so I can only imagine that the people that were fans of their early stuff aren't really digging this new album. I don't know, if you're a die-hard Biffy Clyro fan, if you consider them one of your all-time favourite bands, this album won't really disappoint you. Just, you know, it's not really my thing.
We could be nice to each other, wrong for each other, right for each other.
Coming up next, we got the new Olivia Dean album titled The Art of Loving. This album's actually doing really well, and I'm actually really happy about that. Olivia Dean's last album was very critically acclaimed. This new album is getting some actual mainstream success, and I couldn't be happier. This thing's great. Considering that a lot of UK music, especially this decade, has been fairly mediocre. I mean, yeah, we've got the post-punk scene, but just looking at the big mainstream hits to come out of the UK and get big on the UK charts, a lot of it does very much feel in one ear and out the other. Often these songs sound so corporate you'd think they were made by a boardroom. So you would not believe how refreshing it is that songs from this album are getting big, considering they actually sound like something a human being wrote. Like, these songs feel like they were written by someone who actually went through the experiences they're talking about, while still being intensely catchy and very quotable. I mean, is it my favorite album of this year, or even really close? No, not really. Don't get me wrong. I have problems with this thing. Ignoring the lyrics, just looking at the music, this thing can be a bit generic. With the exception of maybe Nice to Each Other, a lot of the songs can kind of sound a bit samey. But even still, I am completely on board with this just because it's refreshing to get an artist like this get big in the UK. I mean, yeah, there are a few other mainstream artists in the UK that feel more genuine, more human, more original, but there aren't many. So overall, this is a good album. I'm glad it exists, and I really hope that Olivia Dean can do even more interesting stuff in the future. Coming up next, we got the new album from Wednesday titled Bleeds. I've seen a lot of acclaim for this band, especially with their previous album, Rats or God. And overall, I do think I like this band, but I'm definitely not as big on them as a lot of other more professional critics are. And this album especially, I just kind of thought was okay. This band famously have a very particular mix of noise rock and country, sort of like Dinosaur Jr., if anyone watching this is into them. It's a sound you don't really hear too many people taking influence from, but it's also a sound that can get very monotonous. And when it comes to Wednesday, once you've heard one song, you've practically heard them all. The vocals are fine, the songs are catchy enough. It's just, they kind of all sound a bit similar. Still though, I am glad a band like Wednesday exists and is taking influence from that kind of sound. But like, I don't exactly have much to say about it. It doesn't leave much of an impression. Before we continue on with this video, I just want to quickly do something. This is usually the point in the video where I promote an upcoming band or artist and their gig, but I couldn't find anyone this week. So instead, I thought I'd just let you guys know some of the upcoming projects that I'm working on for this YouTube channel. First up, obviously, there's gonna be another new release video in 2 weeks, talking about the albums that came out this Friday and next Friday. This means we'll be talking about AFI, Snooper, some woman named Taylor something, I don't know. Anyone ever heard of her? As well as that, there is also going to be a ranking of every Weezer album, which I've been teasing for a while, and I'm very nearly finished completing. Weezer are a band where there is a lot to say about pretty much every album, so that is definitely going to be a longer video. What might end up happening is I might end up spending ages on the really bad albums, ages on the really good stuff, and then the more mediocre kind of middle point albums in the ranking, I'll kind of just go over very quickly. As well as that, I did a poll as to who you guys want to see me rank after Weezer. Thank you to everyone who sent your suggestions. I am really grateful for that, especially seeing as I actually got more suggestions this time than I ever have. As for the overall winner of that poll, who you guys wanted to see me rank the most, it was by far Radiohead. So yeah, we've got a new release video coming out soon. We've got 2 new rankings. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm working on an absolutely massive project for this YouTube channel. A project so huge it'll take up 2 videos and will involve me talking about 50 different albums. That project will be the top 25 best and worst albums of 2015. Chances are I'll be doing one of the lists next week and one of the lists in a few weeks' time. I have listened to so many albums for these videos, I'm talking just way too many. I know it's kind of stupid of me to put this much effort into a YouTube channel that doesn't get really many views, but I really enjoy making these videos. And if any of the videos that I just mentioned sound good to you, stay tuned. They're all coming soon. Coming up next, we got the new album from Doja Cat titled V. This album's actually getting a lot of acclaim. People are calling it a big improvement over Doja Cat's last album. And overall, it's okay, but I don't think I like it as much as everyone else seems to. And I think there's one major reason for that. This feels like course correction. Say what you want to about that last album, it was ambitious. All that talk about how she was done making soulless pop trash and how she was going to be making real hip-hop from now on. And then one album later, she's back to making pop music. Not only that, but she's making this very 80s inspired style of pop music that does really well with critics. This album just feels like a huge backpedal, like a desperate attempt to win back her dying fan base. When you look at it like that, this album starts to feel like a really cynical cash grab. But I mean, I guess it's a fairly competent cash grab. If I was listening to the radio for whatever reason and these songs came on, I wouldn't complain. I don't know, I just feel like as much as her last album wasn't great, it did set up something more interesting than what this is. And because of that, this album is kind of disappointing.
Don't play for me. Don't play for me.
Next up, we got the new Prevail album titled Violent Nature. I've never really been a big fan of Prevail. They're one of those bands that get listed as being rock or metalcore, but use so much electronic shit that it's really hard to classify them as such. They're the kind of band where I imagine if I saw them live, they'd be using a shit ton of backing tracks. But with this album, they actually experimented quite a lot. They actually tried something new. Gone are the days when Prevail was just a shitty Linkin Park ripoff. Now we're in the days where they're just a shitty Sleep Token ripoff. God, this album was boring. It's quite possibly the most boring rock album I have heard all year. Say what you want to about President, at least they occasionally change things up. Say what you want to about Sleep Token, at least they take risks. This album right here has to be one of the most just dull and lifeless metal albums I have heard in ages. This album's boring, it's generic, it contains some obvious trend chasing. I just cannot stand it. Moving on. Coming up next, we got the new album from Sprints titled All That Is Over. Sprints are a band that I had never listened to before this album came out. Apparently their debut album was good. It completely flew under my radar, I'm not gonna lie. But now that I'm checking out this full album, I've got to say, this is probably the best post-punk album of the year. This band take a lot of influences from garage rock and punk, and what you end up with is an album that's perfect for fans of bands like Crows and Shame, and maybe even Amyl and the Sniffers. It's abrasive, it's chaotic, it's punky, yet it still has that experimental vibe. The album starts off a lot slower and atmospheric, and then by the time you get to track 3, it just launches you into chaos. These songs are catchy as all hell. Honestly, someone please let me know if that debut album was worth checking out. I would definitely love to listen to that. This album may not be the most original thing in the world. You've definitely heard a post-punk album that sounds like this if you're into the scene, but it's a great example of doing a familiar sound in a new and interesting way, and it is definitely worth your time. I am looking forward to checking out that debut and also checking out whatever they release in the future.
She is afraid of the sounds that I make when I'm around.
Coming up next, we got the new album from Motion City Soundtrack titled The Same Old Wasted Wonderful World. Funnily enough, this is actually my first time listening to Motion City Soundtrack. I've always known that they were a fairly big band in the emo scene, but I never checked them out for myself. Fellow YouTuber Peyton K recommended that I check out their album Commit This to Memory. I'll have to do that next. Unrelated, but definitely subscribe to Peyton's YouTube channel. He released a video yesterday. It was great. But yeah, this is my very first time listening to MCS. I went into this completely blind, and overall, I really enjoyed it. This band famously have a very nerdy take on pop punk and emo, often filling their songs with very geeky references. So those of you like me who annoy all your friends by making references that they don't get in conversation, this is the emo album for you. There's a tiny bit of synth on this album, which kind of makes it remind me of Bomb the Music Industry. Some of these songs have become massive earworms for me. I have had You Know Who the Fuck We Are stuck in my head for days. Just overall, I really enjoyed this album, and I've definitely got to start getting more into Motion City Soundtrack from now on.
Yeah, you fucking with some wet ass pussy. Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet ass pussy.
And finally, we've got the new Cardi B album, Am I the Drama? First things first, there are some pretty good moments on here. There's been a lot of discourse around her track dissing Beer, which I thought was actually a pretty great diss track. She has a few other really creative and clever one-liners throughout this album, but if I'm being honest, this album has one big problem, which is that there is so much filler here. It reminds me of like the late 2010s when stream grifting was a big thing that people were talking about. People, especially in the hip-hop scene, filling their albums with as many songs as possible just to gain streaming numbers. Considering this album ends with her two last big hits, 2 songs you probably haven't thought about in years, I have to imagine that's what's happening here. I mean, there's a few good songs on here, but trying to find them is like trying to find an average-sized needle in a haystack the size of Russia. Most of the album isn't bad, per se, it's just really forgettable. It's a shame, because there's definitely a good album in here, it just didn't really get executed properly. And with that, those are my thoughts on all the albums that I heard in the past 2 weeks.